Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Charity Village webinar. My name is Marina Dawson, and on behalf of Charity Village, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to today's session. We're going to get started in just a moment. We do want to make sure that everyone gets a chance to join today who's coming in from across the country. So we'll just give it a moment or two here just to make sure everyone gets a chance to get on. I can see we've still got numbers climbing rapidly here. Fantastic. Okay, well, I know we do have a lot to cover today, so I think we'll go ahead and kick things off. Again, welcome to today's Charity Village webinar. My name is Marina Dawson, and I'm so pleased to welcome you here on behalf of Charity Village. As we are gathering here on a virtual platform today, it is very important for us to acknowledge that each one of us is joining this webinar from the ancestral or unceded lands of the Inuit, Métis, and First Nation people who call Turtle Island home. As a settler in this land, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you today from the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Snuneymuxw First Nation. I'd like to extend my deep gratitude to the Snuneymuxw people for the privilege of living and working on this beautiful land that they call home. I'd like to invite all of us to take a moment today to reflect on the history of the land on which you live and work, as well as how each of us can take concrete steps to address the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 94 calls to action. Thank you. And before we start today's webinar, I will just run through a few introductions and some housekeeping items. So for those who may be joining a Charity Village webinar for the first time, Charity Village is Canada's largest online job board for the nonprofit sector. In addition to our online job board, organizations can also post volunteer positions. So if you are looking for work or to recruit talent in the sector, Charity Village is a great place to start. We also have a ton of excellent resources for nonprofit professionals, including online courses, articles, free webinars like the one we are presenting today, and of course, fundraising tools, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. Before I introduce our speaker today, I'll just cover some housekeeping items. So you may have noticed when you joined the webinar today that you were automatically put on mute. Since we do have hundreds of participants on today's session, it is very important for us to minimize the amount of background noise so that everyone can clearly hear the presentation. You can still ask questions and make comments using the question box at the bottom of the Zoom control panel. So just please look for that at the bottom of your screen. We will be taking questions at the end of the webinar today, although we may fit a few in here and there as we go through the presentation. But just please submit your questions as you think of them. We'll do our best to get to as many as possible. And of course, you can also email your questions to webinars@charityvillage.com. If you happen to encounter any technical issues with the webinar, either viewing the presentation or with the audio, let us know in that question box or by sending us an email. And of course, we'll do our best to get any technical difficulties resolved as quickly as we can. But in a worst case scenario, just remember we are recording today's webinar. We will send you that full recording by email and you'll receive that tomorrow. So if you get called away or disconnected, you will still be able to view the full presentation afterwards. And with that, I'd like to welcome our presenter today. We're so happy to have back Daryl Hatton, who is a veteran Charity Village presenter and is here to talk today about crowdfunding platforms on Charity Village. Welcome, Daryl.
Thanks, Marina. It's great to be back. We were joking before we got started, everyone, that it just feels like we're a little bit out of practice on all of this because we used to do so many of them in a row. So please forgive us in advance if we stumble a little bit along the way here, but hopefully we'll have a good time to chat today. What we wanted to cover was some crowdfunding success indicators. In other words, what makes a campaign work? Now, I'm founder and CEO of Connection Point and CEO at Fundraiser, which one of the platforms, major platforms in the world. The same technology underlying our platform is what we use to power the Charity Village crowdfunding platform. So the thing, if I happen to slip in and talk about a fundraiser thing or something like that, know that this is the technology and the platform that we have through Charity Village. And there's some really good advantages on working through Charity Village because of the brand recognition in Canada and the capabilities of the platform and the support that you get from the Charity Village team. So just wanted to get that up front so that everybody understands kind of the relationships here. But what we really want to talk about is, like, how are we going to run an end-of-year Giving Tuesday campaign? And what can we do to make it really, really successful? So let's see if we can get our our slides to advance here. When we're running a campaign, one of the questions
Daryl, sorry, can I jump in? We don't have your slide share working right now. If you don't mind just pulling that up again. Thank you.
Yeah.
See, folks, we are a little out of practice.
There. How's that?
There we go. Thank
Yay.
you.
Okay. So what we want to talk about is the a year-end campaign, what we're going to do around GivingTuesday and how we can use that to launch a year-end campaign, and to give you some techniques that'll help make this campaign successful, especially if you've never run one before. But if you have, or you've run online campaigns and you're looking to try and get in, what techniques make a campaign successful? And we'll talk a little bit about, just actual practical things on getting the campaign up and running. And what we did was we surveyed a bunch of the campaigns that run on our platform, and there's lots of them. We've run over 200,000 projects on the platform that have raised over almost $250 million in over 100 countries around the world. So we've got some data on what makes a successful campaign. And we took a look at what makes a campaign work. What are the attributes of successful campaigns versus ones that struggle? So we want to share some of those insights with you, and then we'll talk quickly about how do you create and launch a campaign in less than a day. These things don't have to be a huge amount of work in order for you to get some good success to start. You want to get in on those things. But a big question is, do you want to run one or not? Do you want to end up with a GivingTuesday campaign, or is it, there's some mixed opinions in the industry. Is it worth the effort? It's a very noisy, loud day where there's a lot of information that's coming out, a lot of competing voices going after the donors that are out or potentially out there. And is it important to do it on the day? Our opinion is that you should use it not to focus on just GivingTuesday, but use it as the way to kickstart a launch into an end-of-year campaign. Harness that energy that's out there. Use it to help you get off a key problem that we have in any crowdfunding campaign we call getting off of zero, where you haven't yet had a contribution, and people go, well, gee, I don't know, I don't want to be the first. We call it the empty discotheque problem. If there's nobody in there dancing, nobody wants to get in and go dance. So it's a question you would want to answer for yourself. Do you want to run one in the year? Again, we think that it's a good way to kick off your end of year campaign. So what are the components that make up a successful campaign? And we divide it up into a couple of different areas, each of which has like some specific criteria that we'll cover over. So in order to have a successful crowdfunding campaign in general, GivingTuesday or not, it's really important to have a great campaign story. And the campaign story, though, can be a little different than what you might normally tell on your website or what you might tell in an email appeal. There's a way to structure the story that we found is quite successful, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a sec. One of the things is to pick an attainable goal, an attainable target. It's great that we know we need $1 million in the organization. That would be fantastic if we get it. But if we set that goal, a contributor who's going to give you $50 or $100 may not feel like they're going to move the needle very much. You're much better to pick a realistic goal along the way, because you can always surpass it. We have campaigns on the platform that purposefully will pick a much smaller goal, and then they blow by the goal, and that actually increases the momentum and the amount of money that they can raise. So it's a sense of excitement then, and that it's not the thing where, oh, well, they don't need any more money. That doesn't seem to come up as a message if you message it properly. One of the things you have to do with your campaign is strategically figure out how you're going to promote it, push it out, and get it activated. So promotion, how are you going to get you to share it or other people to share it for you? And activation is the point of getting those first crucial donations to come in, so that it doesn't feel like it's on zero, doesn't feel like the empty discotheque. And then, kind of a natural condition that happens in most crowdfunding campaigns is the doldrums in the middle. The middle of your campaign, the doldrums in the middle of the ocean, where it just feels like you're bobbing around and nothing actually moves forward. And donations stop coming in. You lose the momentum. We've got some techniques for how to get past that. And then the last kind of thing to talk about there is the engagement techniques. So how do you engage with the crowd around you in both social media and with your board members and by email and all sorts of things like that. So let's move forward on that. Campaign storytelling in a crowdfunding campaign. We have a 7-step process for doing this. And if it may not be clear by the time we're finished this discussion, but this is a really good opportunity if you have questions around this to get in and try a campaign on the campaign. It doesn't cost you anything. You don't have to risk anything, show anybody at the beginning, but get in and take a look at the campaign and how the stories are there. And when you played with it a little bit, come back and we can talk to you about what your storyline might look like. A lot of people have initially told us that, gee, I don't think that this could work well for us. And then we kind of take a new take on it. So our strategists and advice that we can give you to really make this work. But there was a campaign that was run very successfully last year on the Charity Village platform called the Worry Monster campaign. And I'm just going to kind of use some of it off the top of my head here on how we told the story. So the Worry Monster is a group out of Niagara that does consultant counseling work for children. And what they identified is during the pandemic, the children were very afraid of what was going on and were suffering mental health problems. So we talked with them about the way they did their story. And it kind of works out here as a good example. The opening line. This is a line that we want in there to help attract your attention, to grab your attention. And it's there to try and help you, the reader, say in their head, oh, I agree with that, so that they already become on your side. So in the Worry Monsters case, the opening line was, each and every one of us has been suffering mental health challenges during the pandemic. And most people would agree with that statement. So, okay, cool. What's going on? Then we describe the problem. And the problem is not lack of funding. The problem is, what is the thing that's going on in the community? What is the thing your mission is about that needs more work? So in their case, they said children are suffering, that they are, hearing conversations with their parents about what's going on. They're seeing news reports. They're worried about their safety. They're worried about what's going to go on. In short, they've lost their balance. And so in a very short paragraph, they were able to describe what was going on with the children that needed help. And then you talk about a solution to the problem. Again, this isn't about talking about the money. The solution is, they said, fortunately, we have a solution. It's a Worry Monster doll. And it's a doll where the child writes down the worries on a piece of paper and zips it up into the mouth of the funny looking doll. And then when they go in for their counseling session, they can work with the counselor on that doll. And they gave in their solution description photos of the doll, photos of kids in counseling with the doll that came from the manufacturer, and just some of the benefits that they were expecting to see happen. Then is the point where we start asking about money. Now that someone could very clearly see there's a problem and there's a solution and there's a gap between those. And so you talk about the gap and say, unfortunately, we've got hundreds of kids that need these dolls that we can't afford to get them. And this is where you can help. So by identifying the gap, they can help the supporters make the supporter the hero, saying you can help a child and their family have a counseling session with one of these dolls. And we talk about it in terms of units of impact. What we want to build up in the donor's mind is a mental image of the help that they're giving. And the reason we want to do this is because it makes it so that they're more willing to give repeatedly. They'll give to your cause multiple times if they get a great feeling of satisfaction that they actually caused something to happen. So the more tangible you can make that, the more likely they are to give again. And we say break it up into units of impact to talk about small different amounts, like the different amounts, the different things that different amounts would help you achieve. So for example, in the Worry Monster doll thing, they said, if you give us, I think it was $35, you can have another worry monster to give to a child. But if you give us $100, we can give them a worry monster doll in one counseling session. And if you give us $200, you can give us a counseling session for the family along with the child. So they gave different levels of impact that people could contribute, but each of them was very clear and easily identified. The second last part of the process here is a quid pro quo, or I'll do for you if you'll do for me. And in this case, you're talking back to the donor about what you're willing to do to help keep them involved in this process. A funny stat that came out of a GivingTuesday working group, the International GivingTuesday organization, we participate in working groups with them where all the different vendors and all the major vendors in the industry are trying to collaborate to increase the amount of giving that's going on in the world. It's funny enough, it's very collegial. We get together and we share information, we share ideas on how to improve giving. And one of the stats that has been brought up is that about 85% of North Americans want to make a difference in both advocating for, they don't always have the money to give again, but they're quite willing to advocate for someone, especially if they're kept involved in the result. So they want to feel a part of the solution. So the quid pro quo is where you tell them about what you'll do with the money that they've given you and how you'll keep them up to date on the progress. And so it's really just a commitment to say, we'll let you know how this program went, how many dolls we got, what are some of the stories of the kids that we're helping. And in doing that, you're making a promise, but it makes it, it's something it's easy to deliver, and it can make the donor much happier. So finally on that, you end up with a call to action. Do we want to contribute at this point? How are we going to share it? There's a variety of things that we can get someone to do, but this is the standard for a story. And if you have any questions, we can deal with them in the end of the event, because I'm probably going to get criticized by my team here for going too slowly. So anyway, when we're looking at engagement techniques, how we're going to get the visitor to the campaign, the potential donor, to understand it, one of the things to do is to use the technology in the platform to create a wish list. And a wish list is things that you wish the donors would fund for you. And again, this is kind of using the idea of the units of impact to talk about how the impact that they can make. There's another way you can, and so if you have a wish list item, then one of the things you can do is you can use capabilities in the platform called do it yourself, or DIY. And with DIY, someone can use one of your campaigns to create a campaign on their own that raises money for you safely, where the money comes into your account, the tax receipt information is all collected, and the tax receipts are all automatically generated, all in accordance with CRA, but it just harvests their energy. And you can see an example of these kinds of campaigns if someone is doing a Give Up Your Birthday, or for GivingTuesday this year, if you're wanting to run a campaign and more actively fundraise for us, run a DIY campaign and help get it out. That's a sophisticated thing. I don't recommend you do it in the first year, but I wanted to let you know about it because that gives you some idea of the power of the platform in what you can do. As the campaign goes forward, we automatically create stories at the various milestones you may achieve. So simply, you got your first contributor. We create a visual story based on the image for your campaign and overlay, so you have something that you can automatically share out. When you hit 25% of your goal, things like that, we generate additional stories, so you don't have to think so hard about when or how you'd share your campaign. In the stories that are going out, when you want to do something we call updates, you want to put out an update to tell your donors and the supporters who might just be following you, they may not have yet decided to contribute, on the results that are being generated. So part of the way you can do that is you count the units of impact, how many Worry Monster dolls were created or acquired so far, and you share those things in an update with your crew. So this is kind of a graphic of the roadmap that you may have when you're looking at your campaign. The number one step, bottom right-hand corner, is when you're going to go into what we call a pre-launch mode. And in the pre-launch mode, you want to kind of warm up your community to the fact that this campaign is coming. Then that is, the community is all the people that will advocate for you. And we'll talk a little bit more about growing a crowd here in doing this. But sorry, I'm just getting myself oriented where I want to cover that. Okay, so the in warming up the crowd, what you're wanting to do is don't spring it on. Don't just all of a sudden, boom, here it is. And they're going, okay, now what do we do? If you can warn them a little bit that it's coming, hey, looking forward to launching our Giving Tuesday campaign, and we're going to launch it the day before. You can do some fun with your crowd in order to get them interested that when the campaign actually starts, they might be willing to contribute and be part of the excitement for it. So this is where you would use public, like Facebook, or dark social or private social, like WhatsApp, Messenger, Instagram, or even email or direct texting to people to get the information out about the campaign coming. Now, there's a whole talk that we do at some point about how to build your crowd. If you don't have a crowd, how can you go about building a crowd and a community around you in social media or in just online presence in total? And it's a fairly good conversation about the various sources of where you can get it from corporate sponsors, where you can get it from celebrity, where you can get it from existing donors or board members or advocates or volunteers, and just how you can end up getting a crowd built around you. I recommend you check out for that webinar, and we may want to even refresh it for you at some point here soon. But anyway, once you get out and you do the promo of your campaign, you're pushing it out, you'll launch it. And it's really important to have lined up a few of the first donors, have agreements with people. You know, you have to strong arm them a little bit and say, hey, look, when we launch this thing, you're going to make a small contribution to kick it off, and share with people that it's active. It's a good thing to put onto your board members, but to get it out there so that it already has a little bit of traction. And the reason you do that is that's social proof. It's that somebody cares about your cause enough that they've given up their hard-earned money. And in doing that, it inspires other people to not be the first. We are very much tribal animals, and we will follow along with what other people in our tribe are doing. So it's a good thing to get your tribe kicked off in the right direction. But then the doldrums happen. You get that initial interest in your launch, and your campaign starts to go, and then it can peter out. The people that you've talked with initially on your own, you may have run into the limit of the people that you've been able to talk with in your crowd. And so one of the things to do in the doldrum side is you do another push. And you typically will do this around one of your milestones. So you've hit 25% of your goal, you've hit 50% of your goal, something like that. But you start to communicate with the donors that have already supported you, not asking for more contributions, but telling them about the progress that you've made and asking them to share. A share is a very, very simple action. It doesn't cost anyone that much. And it's just a little time. So by telling them things like, hey, we're only 10 days away from the end of our campaign. Would you mind pushing it out and sharing it for us? Or, hey, we're happy we've hit 50% of our goal. You know, do you know any friends like you that could help us get to the rest of the way? There's a few communications that can be done at this point. In the platform, we have technologies that'll help you push out the update to just the list of donors that have already contributed, or the supporters that have said, hey, I'll follow this, but I'm not ready to give yet. And so it does what we call auto segmentation. It pulls together this list for you, so you don't have to keep track of all the lists of who donated, who didn't. You just publish the update to the campaign page, and it's automatically distributed out to everyone according to Castle rules and things like that. So an important little piece in the middle is the communications in the doldrums are what makes the difference. And then very important, if you want to retain the donors at the end, they've given to this campaign, may have been the first time that they're working with your organization, because they've come in from a referral from an existing donor or a board member or something like that, celebrity or endorsement. After the campaign, you need to make a plan for how you're going to retain these donors. And typically one of the best ways to retain them is to tell them the work you did with the money they gave you, very specifically. Digital donors, and particularly millennials and Gen Z, love to know how they made a difference, what their specific difference was. So if you said, hey, we got $68,000 worth of Worry Monsters, they might go, well, that's nice. But if you said you helped buy Worry Monsters you gave a Worry Monster to one of the 100 kids that got one, some number like that can make them feel much more empowered that they've made a difference. And so by communicating that at that point, you can open up a level of dialogue to talk with them on a more regular basis. It was interesting. One of the other stats that came out of the GivingTuesday call was that there was a real interest in donors, that they're willing to have a lot more communications from a cause if they're not all asks. If the only thing you ever do is ask about how brutal it is out there and we need more funding for these kids or whatever the cause is, they get turned off pretty quickly. They get fatigued with the message, not necessarily giving, but of the message. So we have a suggestion: you use an 80-20 rule. You do show and tell 80% of the time, and then you have an ask 20% of the time. So the show and tell can be, hey, these are the results we're getting, or here's a focus story on one of the benefactors of what we do. Those kind of things are great stories to share. And then there can be an ask in that around, hey, are you willing to share it and become an advocate for us? But you can also just give them an update and move on. And by giving them an update, they start to look forward to your communications as opposed to dreading them. So this is the roadmap. Long description. Again, we've done this based on the 200,000 campaigns that we run on the platform. And so we got some stats that came out that might be interesting. In a crowdfunding campaign page, you have a cover image, and the cover image is next to a statistics panel. Campaigns that add an image are 21% more likely to meet or exceed their goal. So in other words, the image is important, the image that you have. Don't put out your logo of your organization. It's quite impersonal. Try and put out photos or something of your people doing the work that you do, or the people that you help. Because when those photos are authentic, they don't have to be all that polished. And sometimes they're better if they're not polished. When they're authentic, people engage with them more and they give more frequently. Another thing that we learned is that campaigns that have a video are 13% more likely to meet or exceed their goal. And so a lot of causes get into concern of, gee, I don't have the budget to make a video. I really don't. And the problem is that we're thinking about doing it in a hyper-professional way. If you've seen the emergence of TikTok and YouTube and the amount of handheld video that is very, very popular, it has conditioned the audience now to not worry about having the really high degree of polish. They want the authentic message. So sometimes just putting your cell phone camera on you, taking a video and saying, this is why I'm really excited about the work we're doing at the end of the year, and get your team or you or somebody to talk about it. One of your volunteers is just pumped to be helping you out, or one of the beneficiaries that's really enjoying what you're doing. Capture that, make that the video with a little bit of an ask in there, and you can do a great thing. I had this also goes for updates. You can publish a video with your update. And we had one campaign that was on the downtown east side of Vancouver that was raising money for porta potties and hand wash stations. And when they arrived, they had the funding, and when they arrived, the campaign was still running because they were trying to get more of these. The executive director got her cell phone camera and showed them unloading these things out of the truck, and she was tangibly excited. And so she shared, she said, I can't wait to get these into the hands of the people in our market. And her contributions spiked up. It's a handheld grainy video in the downtown east side, and she spiked a lot more contributions by being authentic. Campaigns that customize their donate button raise more money. Now, this is a really interesting thing. On the campaign page, you've got a big contribute button. You can change what it says. And if you convert that into a specific unit of impact, then you can get a significantly better result. So for example, you said feed a child for a day, or some, like just one of your units of impact. If you can get it in, it has to be really short, but if you can do that, you can get a much higher conversion rate on people that come to your campaign page. So the more action oriented you make it, the more likely they are to convert. So the example here, plant a tree. That motivates somebody to go and move much more frequently. Use these things. They're really easy to do. Takes you 10 seconds to do it. And I kind of harp on the idea of providing updates, but the reason we do it is that those campaigns that provide at least 2 updates are generally raising over 20% more than they would have otherwise. And the update can be that you hit a milestone, that you've got a result going on, daily life of what happened in your organization with the money coming in, how excited you are, all sorts of stories like this. And a little anecdote is that Harvest Project in North Vancouver is a customer of ours, and one of my friends, Philippe, does the operations. And I was pestering him, going, "You got to add an update. You got to add an update." And he was kind of like, "Yeah, okay, yeah. I'm busy. Don't." Finally said, "Sure." So he added an update, and the next morning he came back and said, "Oh my God, it actually worked. We got a handful of new donations from donors we've never seen before. One of them was $1,000 gift." And it's because somebody in their existing network had shared out, found a like-minded individual who liked the story of the work that they were doing, which was awesome, by the way. And they inspired a new donor. And that's one of the powers of why you'd use a crowdfunding campaign, is that by having it so engaged in social media and with your advocates, your donors that are already supporting you, they can bring you net new donors. So it's one of the strengths of the platform that doesn't get talked about enough, about why you would do a crowdfunding campaign. Okay, we give you a bunch of default donation levels, and sometimes they're not all that smart. So the thing is, if you set your own default donation levels, how much each different level of gift is, and you stagger it or align it with the units of impact, you get about 12% more contributions, because it's that visualization, again, of how much the donor is helping you. What's the impact that they're creating? So, $20 gave us some food, $50 gave us a jacket for one of our members in our community, things like that. If you can attach a photo to each one of those that shows the impact, it works even better. And we're trying to figure out how to tease that out of the data about adding the photo makes a difference when you have those amounts. Okay. So what's different between a regular campaign and a GivingTuesday campaign? And, we suggest your ask is very crystal clear and tangible. And what we mean by that is that a lot of the times our general appeals are about the general cause that we have and what we're trying to do. We recommend that for a GivingTuesday campaign and your year-end campaign, you kind of turn it around. You focus on a specific project that you're trying to get funded and talk about that. Talk about the goal for it, talk about what the difference all that funding will make, because it gives you a much better story that will relate to a donor. So the more specific you make it, the more likely you are to get it funded. When you're doing the ask, there's checkboxes that we ask the donor if it's okay to use the funding for where you need it most in the organization. In other words, it makes it unrestricted funds. But so, you can ask in a good way, and they will trust you to use the money in where it's most needed. But by telling the story properly about how they can help and being genuine about it, you want to not, bait and switch. But you can end up creating a much better result for the organization because it is that tangible piece for the donor. So, by using a wish list, for example, you can give them an idea of the very specific types of help they can give you, as opposed to, hey, give us some money and we'll do good things. We said that the goal should be attainable, and starting small in this case, especially with if you're first time at doing this, starting with a small goal and blowing by it is way better than starting with a big goal and not reaching it. And your community will appreciate it more. It shows that you're thoughtful about how you're going to set up your campaign, what you're looking for money for. You're not dreaming, you know, you might be, but you're actually thinking about what's important and what you can get done and what your community will help you do. So make it very, very tangible so that the donor feels like you can achieve it. The thing about this campaign is to, and I think this applies to almost every campaign, is to try and start warming up your crowd ahead of time. Get them used to the idea that you're going to do a campaign. And this is important, especially if you can have one of the best sources of traffic for your campaign can be from your corporate sponsor. How many people, when you talk to your corporate sponsor, you might hear from them, look, we'd love to help you more. What can we do without writing you a bigger check? Because they're constrained on funding, especially in this year. But one of the best things they can do is they can advocate for you. And this is probably one of the little hidden gems in this conversation. Ask your corporate partners to talk with their staff and hopefully their customers or the supply chain and say, on this Giving Tuesday, when you're thinking about who to give to, we recommend you go to the charity we support. And they do that endorsement for you. Then they can share that out on their social media. Proud to be working with your group on Giving Tuesday. And they get that for free. They get the shine of helping support you. You get traffic. You get people coming to your page that go, okay, well, I had the decision made for me. I really didn't know who to support during all this noisy day. So I'm glad they helped me figure that out. You need to warm up those crews well in advance in order to get that happening. Corporate plan, you probably need a couple of weeks to let them know about and give them a social media asset that they can share, a photo of what your campaign cover is going to look like or something like that, and then ask them to share it out to the community. So by warming it up that way, and then they communicate ahead of time, look for this campaign on Giving Tuesday, it can really increase your traffic. There's the last point here is to build a communications or promo bridge between Giving Tuesday and year-end campaign. And I've said it a couple of times, but how do you make the transition? If you set it up of launching on Giving Tuesday, but the campaign is headed towards the end of the year, 30% of the contributions happen typically in December. So we want to have a campaign that's active at that time frame, that's already got some momentum, that has been launched with Giving Tuesday. And you can start to bridge the messaging along and talk about holiday giving in the campaign page through the updates and even adjusting the content on the campaign or the photos of the imagery. It makes it a great way to give you a platform to tell the story and bring people in for this year-end giving. You've got some awareness, now you can help convert it. So you can create a Giving Tuesday campaign in less than an hour. It's a pretty simple thing to do. The steps are, this is a screenshot out of the application itself. We ask you to tell your story, and you can make the story fairly simple. If you follow the rules that we have, you'll get much better results, but you can start with a simple story. Add some photos and video and wish list items about the things that you want people to give to you. These are things that you may have already on your desktop. You don't have to go out and do a special photo shoot for it. You've got content. Describe the goal that you have, how much you're looking for, and then you connect it to your Stripe or PayPal payment processing account. We use Stripe or PayPal because they're first off, they give you a charity rate, which is helpful. And the second thing is that they have a very smooth checkout flow that we've embedded in the platform. So it reduces the friction when you're actually making contribution. Then take a look at your campaign, review it, share it around with some friends and say, what do you think? And when you're good, do the promo work that you're going to do and then go launch it. So, you can't necessarily launch it right away if you need to do a big promo plan. But, it doesn't hurt to test one of these things and then just do another one when you actually go to work on Giving Tuesday. So get familiar with it. Take the bike for a ride and, or as we say, take the car for a test drive. And if you need driving lessons, then contact us. We can do a consulting work with you, talk a little bit more about what it's capable of and help you tune up what you're doing to make it work. We talk about the different capabilities of the platform. there is a lot of technology available to you to make it easy to do all sorts of different kinds of campaigns. You know, by starting with a GivingTuesday campaign, you can learn the basics of the platform. And then if you want to do something more sophisticated, like a peer-to-peer campaign or a DIY campaign, or take one of your corporate partners and have them do a matching dollars campaign, a sponsorship campaign, or do a charity storefront where you're actually using wish list items that people can shop to help you with the delivery. The wish list items work, and the charity storefront works really well for the year-end campaign because it's so strong a communication of units of impact. Shelter Nova Scotia and a number of others have used this. Their first crowdfunding campaign that they ran at holiday season, they raised $100,000 their first try and they were stunned by the results because the community went, I get it now. I get what you do. Here's some money, go do it. So we just wanted to give you an idea of the comprehensiveness of the platform. And then if I can figure out how to advance my slide. So, you know, Charity Village offers this platform to you as a community. And there's a couple of key things that are there. First off, you get all this functionality for free. There's no sign-up cost, no monthly, no annual, per seat, per donor, per whatever fee involved in it. It's free fundraising. There's a model that we call Simply Free, where all you have to do is pay the payment processing costs for Stripe or PayPal. And we ask the donors if they'll leave us an optional and completely optional tip during the checkout process to help fund the platform. And then we have what we call Nearly Free, which is where we charge a small fee, but we ask the donors if they'll cover that fee and the payment processing fee. In the first case, about 70% of donors will leave us a tip. In the second place, because they like you more than they like us, about 90% of the donors will leave them a tip or pay the fees for them. And that gives you an effective fundraising cost of between 1% and 2%, including your payment processing fee. So it's actually cheaper than running the donate button on your website. So something to consider. Cost doesn't have to be an issue here at all. And the cool thing is that you get coaching set up and coaching and set up and support. There's, you know, help articles. We do webinars like this. You can talk to the folks at Charity Village, and they'll give you some help on how to make your campaign successful. So I think advance. So if you're interested in this and you want to learn more, if you type SOS into the chat box, the team at Charity Village can arrange to have a call with you and get started on this and help you figure out what your strategy should be and how you can execute it on the platform. So hopefully, I can't see the chat, but hopefully it'll light up with SOSs because sometimes that happens. And, you know, I think you can see from our casual approach to this, comprehensive, yes, but we like to chat about this stuff. We're passionate about getting this to work for you. And so we are looking forward to helping you raise some more money. So Marina, I think over to you.
Amazing, Daryl. Thank you so much for another great presentation. And I do have some questions that have come in, but before we dive into those, I do want to let folks know if you want to go ahead and take us up on that coaching opportunity. It's a really good one. Just type SOS into you can put it in the Q&A. We will see it there, and then someone will reach out to you from our team to get that set up. Let's dive into questions, Daryl. So this is a good one. If someone's running a crowdfunding campaign, can you send that in addition to your traditional email campaigns that you're doing, especially towards the end of the year, or do they interfere with one another?
Great question. This is one of the pieces of data that was coming out of the GivingTuesday working group. And they said, surprisingly, it doesn't seem to cannibalize. It's not like if you give them two options, it doesn't mean that they choose neither. So the thing is that you have to be cautious about how you would phrase that. For example, you wouldn't want to do a whole bunch. Too many decision points means that someone typically won't decide. They get into analysis paralysis. I don't know which one I should do. And then they don't contribute at all. But if you have the choices, some of them may prefer the social media campaign. Some of them may prefer the email-based campaign and the messaging on each. So it doesn't seem to do harm. I recommend that you try and keep it focused. And if your year end is not strong already, you might want to give this a try, because it basically functions as your year end campaign plus more. It can do more because of the social component that's involved and the sharing component that's involved. So I would take a look at doing more, but it doesn't have to stop you from doing both.
That's great. And for an organization that doesn't have strong social media support yet, so they don't have a lot of followers, the person asking the question is, acknowledging we're 45 days out to Giving Tuesday. When should they be thinking about pre-launching?
The key thing there is to get the plan for how you can get more advocacy in the people around you. And so that's that. I was referring to the build, buy, borrow, or crowd type talk that we do. And I'd recommend that you look it up, and maybe we can find it and give a link in the chat. Getting going soon on that is important. If you know you're going to do a campaign, then you've got something very concrete to go out to the board members you have, maybe some of your existing advocates, maybe some of your volunteers. They don't have to follow you on social media at this point. They have to be willing to advocate for you in their own social media. So there's a difference here. It's not about them following you and then you post it to your Facebook page and people naturally, give to it. What the ask is for them to share it in their own social media. And in doing that, you expand your network thousands of times. If I've got 500 friends on Facebook and I share it out, about 10%, 15% of those are going to see it. So one contact from me, if I'm willing to advocate it out, means that 50 of my friends might see it. If you think about that across all the people that you've got in your network, count up how many board members you have, and if each of them would share it, and if you could get 50 contacts from each of them, you've reached quite a crowd. So don't worry about not having the crowd on social media yourself at this point, because you're asking them to advocate for you, which is a pretty lightweight ask, and they'll bring you a much larger crowd. Hope that answered the question.
That's great. Thank you, Daryl. And that's a good time for me to mention, we did share a link in the chat with some information about how to start building your community. For anyone who hasn't been able to access the chat links, we will round those up and include them with the webinar recording on the landing page when we send that out to you. So you'll be able to access all of that. Daryl, we've had some questions about units of impact and how to best communicate those. Should it be like quantities, numbers? Should it be more of a sort of qualitative type message? Like, how do you recommend focusing on that unit of impact?
Good question. When it's what you're trying to do is to show a very specific result. So, for example, let's say that we were feeding homeless on the downtown east side. If we talked about $20 will buy a meal for them, that's a very tangible, quantitative description. The qualitative one is that if you're going to change or transition them from one level to another level, so you can kind of upgrade this scenario, something like that. I think quantitative is easier to get to. Qualitative can be more emotional, and that has an appeal, because when you're saying that with the Worry Monster dolls, they were talking about it in terms of units, but what they're really were offering there is the look in the child's eyes when they're not scared anymore, and so that's a qualitative thing. So I don't know. I think quantitative is easiest to start with, and then see how it develops for you.
Wonderful. And sort of on a similar vein, I think we have some questions about micro projects, storefronts, and campaigns with rewards. So maybe you could talk a little bit about the difference between those different types of campaigns and what they might look like in practice.
Sure. So one of the things is that as we are a crowdfunding campaign, we have the concept of rewards or incentives that come out with the campaign. And those can be what we call a perk, a product, a ticket, or a wish list. So a storefront, a charity storefront, is when you have kind of like a shopping grid of those elements that people can decide to contribute to. Especially, it works really, really well when you're doing your wish list items. And you get a grid. If you've ever been to the shopping site Etsy, where you see all these different products kind of laid out, looks a little bit like that. And because it gives the user a bit of a shopping experience, they're saying, okay, well, I'll take one of those and I'll take one of those. And they build up a cart of the things that they would like to give you money for you to acquire. They're granting a wish for you. And it can be a very effective way of communicating it. Micro projects is a different concept. When you heard me earlier talk about at the end of the year, don't focus on the very broad mission, focus on a very specific mission. Sometimes within an organization, instead of saying, look, we need to fund all of our rescue dogs, you might say we need to fund a rescue dog one at a time. Those are micro projects. When you can tell the story of a very specific dog training program, for example, when you tell a very specific program about helping a classroom. We have a customer, Beaverton Education, that does micro projects, one for each STEM project or art project within a classroom. These are small campaigns. They may have $500 or $1,500 goal, but by dividing it up into small little bits, it's much easier for the donors to understand the impact they're making. And if I give $100 towards a $1,000 campaign, I feel like I moved the needle. And that's why you would use micro projects. Micro projects, the platform is designed to make it really, really easy to do a campaign start with a micro project. We learned this from some of our animal rescues, where they would run literally thousands of dogs in a year that they're trying to rescue. They ran a campaign for each dog for between $350 and $500 to get the dog the shots and the grooming they needed to get it ready for adoption. And so we had to make it hyper quick for them to start a new campaign. I think the record is something like 30 seconds now for them to start a new campaign for a dog. So once they got the micro projects model up and running, it was trivial for them, one executive director, a handful of people to help rescue, to raise, a few $100,000 in a year and rescue 500 or 1,000 animals at a time. So there's that. And I think the other one was a sponsorship campaign. In the platform, you have the capability of adding in matching donors from a corporate sponsor and tracking that up to a budget. So there's some technology that makes that really easy to set up and communicate. And when we talk about your campaign storytelling, this isn't about web page layout. You're not having to do a whole bunch of HTML work and things like that. You're using a word processing like editor that can drop in images in and change fonts and stuff like that. It's a really easy editing experience. So getting your content out and making it look good is something normal mortals can do. You don't have to be a web designer to make it all work. I think I covered all of those.
Yeah, I think you did, Daryl. And that's an excellent segue into what I wanted to cover next, which, you brought up the rescue dogs, which is an excellent example, but we always have folks in the crowd that say, but I don't work with cute puppies. I have a much more difficult cause, in terms of communicating that need and that story. So for those that are working, we've got someone who's, indicated they work for an advocacy organization where they're, working on disarmament and, some pretty high level ideas here. What can they do to help break their message down? And I'll also just throw out there of anyone who's dealing with that, you definitely want to sign up for a coaching session, because Daryl is and team are masters at helping to really flesh out what that storytelling looks like on the platform. But I'll hand it over to you, Daryl, to answer that one.
Yeah, it is obviously, if you got cute kids, they're the most fundable thing. Funny enough, cute dogs are even more fundable than cute kids. We apparently care about dogs more than kids. But if you're trying to fund something that is more difficult like that, is where it becomes really important to start thinking about the progress you're making towards a goal. And so if, for example, if you were a human rights thing and you were working on funding that, and you're doing work on advocacy and promotion and protest, and one of the sub projects you might be working on is we're working on funding a campaign to send one of our lawyers in to make a pitch to whatever about this, and we're going to communicate that. And so the funding and the breakdown can be someone who goes, okay, I get why that's important. I'll pay a little bit to help make that happen. The more amorphous it is, the bigger your cause, and it's just this big black box that you put money into and hopefully advocacy happens, the harder it is to fund anything like that. So when you can start talking sometimes about the day-to-day of what you do, and that this is helping us get to this next step, it can be a way to break up that story into fundable projects. And we've seen that happen in human rights. We've got Allied Global Justice doing this as a group across multiple causes. It's possible, and you have to work a little harder, but that's where your genius can come out, because you love doing what you do, and you talk about why it's important.
Thanks, Daryl. And I think we'll wrap up with the last question today about how often can you run any type of crowdfunding campaign? So, we're talking about GivingTuesday today, but, organizations are running these campaigns throughout the year successfully. So how do you kind of balance that?
Well, it's the key thing is that a very good underlying question there is that, can you have an overlapping campaign? And the answer is yes. And we do have a number of organizations that have kind of what we call an evergreen campaign, that they're looking to collect recurring donations all through the year. And, so monthly, everyone gets charged. They use it for helping communicate out to their monthly donors about the impact that monthly giving program is generating. Then they may run a GivingTuesday campaign. You can run some campaigns on fun topics like Mother's Day is coming up. Give a gift on her behalf and tell her about it. She doesn't need more stuff. There can be campaigns like that you can run. There can be all sorts of different focus. If you've got a special need coming up, hey, the pandemic was a really good example of this, where people said, we would normally be funding all of our operation or our programs, but right now we need PPE, and because our employees all went home, we need to buy some computers. Can you help us out with that? And they ran short little burst campaigns that helped them with operational expenses, and people were willing to fund it. So it's a little bit your creativity. You can overlap them. And we encourage you to run more campaigns. And I guess we do that because we learned from the animal rescues and that they can have simultaneous, sometimes hundreds of campaigns running in a year, and it still works.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Daryl. We're going to wrap up there, but did you have any final comments before we sign off today?
I just hope everybody gets how passionate we are about making this work, and we can bring a lot of creativity to help you with your message. So, give us a shot, and we'll do our best to help make it successful with you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Daryl, for another great presentation. I think that passion always shines through when you're presenting, and it's wonderful to see so many organizations finding such success with the platform. Just as a reminder, so if you do want a little bit of help, either getting your campaign set up or optimizing your campaign with those storytelling tips and figuring out what your story is, please do pop the SOS into the Q&A, or of course you can email us at webinars@charityvillage.com, and we'd be happy to set you up with someone. With that, you will all receive a follow-up email tomorrow with the link to the webinar recording, the slide deck. We will include the links that we shared as additional resources as well. It is publicly available. Please feel free to share that with your colleagues, your board, your friends. The email will also potentially have a survey link. You should see a survey link somewhere up there on your Zoom screen that you can fill out right now, but we'll have that in the emails as well. So you can give us your feedback. You can also leave your name there if you'd like someone from Charity Village to follow up with you. I'd encourage you to sign up for our next upcoming webinar, which will happen, I believe, October 27th. We're going to be unveiling our brand new salary and benefits report for the sector. So that's not one that you want to miss. You can find that and all of our webinars at charityvillage.com/webinars. And on behalf of Charity Village, thank you so much for joining us today. I wish you all a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.